Our children in chronological order are Craig,
Susan,
Leanna,
Joe,
Sam,
James,
Heidi,
Rebecca,
Clarence.
and Milton.
My very, very earliest memory, I actually remember when Dad was in the service and Mom had me, so I was a baby, maybe a toddler or something. But I remember that we used to go out underneath some kind of a tree, and there was another lady that had a little baby that was a red-headed girl maybe or something like that. And I have this vague memory of shade and trees and Mom, and that's the only memory I have. And then I jump way till basically Hamilton.
Do you remember the time when the first time I took you out on the lawn when you were a baby and you had bare feet and you didn't like the feel of the grass, and so you would stand on one leg at a time and hold the other one up because you didn't want to stand on the grass. You cried and lifted your leg up.
Well, I've seen some pictures of some little sailor outfits or something that used to put me in that I was half embarrassed to be dressed like that, little cowboy things, little sailor suits. I think that's a first child thing. You dress your kid up in all kinds of things, so I don't know if that's true or not, but I've seen some pictures of that. After that, I remember when we were in Hamilton, I was probably, 5 or 6 when we first moved there? Because I went first 3 grades there, I think, right?
Oh, yeah, I went to first grade there, but we had moved there before the first grade.
Yeah, so about 5 or 6, I can remember the Hamilton Ranch, which was a really beautiful ranch. It's where I learned how to fish, and I remember one of the first times that I caught this fish, and it was underneath a culvert in this little creek that ran through the property, and it got off, and I was just hysterical and ran with my pole all the way to the house, boobing to Mom about losing this fish. And so I remember that. I remember Dad in the dairy barn. I remember digging a big old pit that the manure ran into, a lagoon type of thing. And Grandpa Taylor, my Grandpa Taylor, Dad's dad, and Grandma Taylor lived in a cabin next door to them. I'd go and visit with them, and I remember one time was when they were digging that pit and they were hooking up some pipes or something in the bottom of it next to the dairy barn. There's all this dirt piled up around, and I was playing with rocks, and they were telling me not to do it, and I couldn't resist throwing rocks into where they were working, and I hit Grandpa Taylor in the head. He had this big pith helmet on, and it hit him in the head, and it knocked it over, and he started cussing at me and coming up the side of that, and I was just screaming across the yard, trying to head for home and hoping he wouldn't catch me. So
do you remember that dish that you talked about I think it was the springtime, and we would go there when the water came, and we would run in front of that water coming down that
and
ditch.
let it chase us.
And then in the wintertime it would freeze over, and we would skate across that, and we would thought we were so brave. I went and saw that ditch as an adult.
Is it teeny?
It's about a yard.
No, yeah, it was
Seriously,
a gigantic.
It's about a yard wide, and we were so brave. We would skate across.
In
that.
my memory,
it was
a
like a canal.
gigantic canal.
Yeah.
And then
and
it was.
it's teeny
When
tiny.
I went back, I found an irrigation
And there's a little
ditch
patch
in
of
its
quaking
place.
aspens right below it that I sprained my ankle in about 10 times in a row, because it was all this deadfall like this, and we'd go play down there, and I'd fall off, and I sprained ankle after ankle in there for a while. It was.
Do you remember that when you went to first grade, that 2 weeks before first grade was out, when you were supposed to be taking all the tests, you got
sick or something,
yeah,
right?
you got the mumps or the measles and couldn't go to school because you were contagious. And so you got well enough that I could take you the very last day, and the teacher gave you the paperwork, and you went through that in about 10 minutes. It's supposed to take an hour, and she says he went through it so fast I was scared he was going to make a mistake, but he got 100%. So
You were a genius.
Speaking of Craig's geniusness, I mean, this is.
There's a lot of kids in this family, by the way, so let's revolve away from Craig as soon as possible.
I'll just tell one more thing because it fits here. When I was in high school, I had the same chemistry teacher, I think it was chemistry, as Craig. And I remember him telling me, "Your brother Craig is the smartest kid I've ever known."
yeah, he got A's just like that.
It was
no
all
problem.
downhill from there.
Well, one thing that I remember, Joe, he tried to kill himself a dozen times. He had more accidents, run his arm through the washing machine wringer.
Swallowed 60 of his pills.
60.
Yeah,
They thought they were candy.
Had to have his stomach pumped out.
and all this pink stuff was coming out as they pumped in. He'd say, please stop, please stop.
Do you remember that, Joe?
I don't remember that.
Do you remember hanging on the irrigation ditch? Bridge?
That
holding
was,
on to your ditch?
No, but I do remember Mom putting me in a, I don't know what
harness.
in a
Daddy
harness
made you a harness.
that buckled in the back, and it was like child abuse because it had a little cord that connected to the back of it. You couldn't get at it, and then she'd connect the other end of the lawn to the
To the house somewhere.
yeah to
No,
the
it
house.
was
No, it was to the.
clothesline.
So you could
Oh
run
yeah,
up and down
it was a
it.
clothesline. So I had about
So you could
20
play
foot
outside.
of movement.
It was a human dog run.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so about 6 hours later, she'd come out
He
and see how I
couldn't
was
get
doing.
tangled up in it because it was just long enough to reach the clothesline. He could run up and down the clothesline and that as far
so
as he
is
could
this
go.
a false memory? I thought I remembered us getting Joe to chase us so that around the house until his line would stop and he couldn't go any farther because
That's a fault. Maybe up and down the clothesline, but not around the house.
Yeah, I think she had about 20 foot of line, so you take the clothesline and the 20 foot of excess, you had about a 40 foot radius that you could play in, while Mom was doing other chores in the house.
In today's world, they'd call Child Protective Services on.
I want to know if anybody else got to school and opened their lunch and all they had was a butter sandwich. Just wondering if that happened to anybody else in the family. I don't know.
I always
if she
had
just had
some
a whole
raisins
bunch
with
of
my
lunches
butter
going. And you guys know how much I like butter. I actually came home and buried those butter sandwiches underneath that big pine tree.
Well, it was those paper sacks. She would always want you to fold them, and I folded mine so religiously that I got a square faded mark in my back pocket where the
we had to
where-
reuse the
where the
paper
paper
sack.
sack was.
Recycle the paper sack.
And you couldn't get a new one until all those folded seams started to rip apart, and that was your lunch sack for who knows how long.
Hey, you
And
know
do-
what? Oh, go ahead, Laddie.
Oh, do you remember our treat was walnuts and raisins?
Yeah, that's what I say. On lucky, we usually got raisins. On lucky days, we got nuts and raisins.
And other kids had Pop Tarts and full on chocolate. And you couldn't even trade with the kids because the kids would trade sandwiches and things.
They
And
didn't want a butter
You're over
sandwich.
there with your cards and like just hoping somebody wants a walnut or raisin. Like, I will give you a peanut butter sandwich. I'll give you the butter sandwich and the peanut butter sandwich and the walnuts and raisins
I'll raise you
for
2 raisins.
for your jelly beans. I mean, it's like you had no collateral to trade with whatsoever.
Well, I think you're all missing the real scary part with Joe. And that's when he was a little bit smaller than I think than the clothesline episode. Mother was pregnant with
8 months
Sam,
pregnant.
8 months pregnant with Sam,
Could hardly waddle.
and she saw this. How old would Joe have been when
3 years older.
3 years
He was
older.
a 3-year-old. He
Probably
was 3.
2.5.
2.5.
two and a half maybe?
No, he was 3 when I was
Yeah,
born.
so he was about 3 years old.
So he headed up towards the corrals where this irrigation ditch run underneath a bridge to go on to the other
I
side.
knew where he was going. And I started to waddle after him as fast as I could go because I knew he was headed for that ditch.
It was like a magnet to him.
It was. And I waddled as fast as I could go. And he jumped in just as I almost got a hold of him. And the water drew him down out of my reach. But he put his little hands up and caught the edge of the
Bridge.
The
bridge. And that gave me enough time to grab him, and I could just feel the suction of pulling him out of the water.
Is that when you put him on the harness?
I think it was after that.
I'm glad you told that because I think it helps people understand the clothesline and harness.
So Mom and Dad spent years saving Joe's life, and Dad spent years trying to kill me.
Oh, I did not. You was my main helper.
he ran over me twice with a tractor.
In the silage
And
pit.
the first time I fell asleep and fell forward, and he couldn't get the tractor stopped in time, but he did get it stopped right on top of my arm, about an inch from my head right here. And then we looked over and saw that he was stopped on my arm. In his panic to get off of it, he popped the clutch and spun it. So I had a great big old black streak across my arm where the rubber had just like spun my arm.
Well, I remember with Sam, when we moved from Montana to Utah and was building our new home out there, he was out there visiting with the construction people, and I guess they must have been asking him questions about his home and his parents. And he talked to about my. What did he say about me?
Oh, they asked him about what does your dad do, and he says he's a
bullfighter.
yeah. He says he's a bullfighter, and they said,
Because it's all you working cattle and the sheets and stuff.
Yeah.
and then they said, well, what does your mama do? And she says she's just a mean old witch.
Yeah, that's funny.
Now that has to be the most unfair statement ever.
Yes.
Our angel mother.
Yeah.
Well,
What?
I remember about the work ethic Mom and Dad taught us that when I was a kid, I hated summers because summers meant to me get up at 5:30, come home at about 11:30 at night when the work day was done, and all my friends could run around and go to the city swimming pool and play baseball, and I couldn't wait till school started. I actually had 8 hours in the middle of the day to go to school where I didn't have to work. But you learn some really unbelievable lessons because they take you working on the ranch, and we had to have this, all these boys and the girls too help do stuff. But I remember changing irrigation ditches where I'd have to do the last set at night. The sun would have set, and I'm like 3 miles from the house, and the moon's up, and I'm walking across the fields. Today's world, if your kid has to walk 3 blocks, you run down and Mom's waiting on the corner to pick him. So I'm hiking 3 miles through the dark with the coyotes and the wolves and whatever else is out there, to get home and go to bed, and then wake up at 5:30 and do it all over again, day after day for the whole entire summer.
And for breakfast, you got an instant breakfast.
But we learned how to work,
But
that's for sure.
yeah, they sure did. And little James, he was the shortest one of all, and I don't know who he worked with, but
He changed pipe with me,
with you,
and we were too small to do it by ourselves, so he
he
would be on
have
one
to
end.
hold his hands up this high
Because the hay was that high, or the grain.
so they could miss the grain as they moved the pipe down. And anyway,
I used to get so mad at him because it took us so long to change the pipe because he kept falling down all the time. He'd be soaked from head to toe.
yeah, oh yeah.
And all you could see was that riser going through the grain.
Yeah, you couldn't see little James, but you could see the pipe he was holding up above. And Susan, you got to tell about Joe and you, how mad he got at you because you went.
I think I should tell it instead of Joe because he exaggerates so much. So I would work really, really super hard unless Joe got mad, as I recall.
She was pretty slow.
Are you going to tell it or
How did
am
you and I get teamed up anyway? Who came up with that bright idea?
I think that Craig was old enough to do it by himself, and we weren't old enough.
And Dad
yet.
needed more helpers.
Yes, and so he teamed you and I up until you got old enough to leave me behind, and then he let you go out on your own.
But you know what's amazing about all these farm stories out there? You never hear Leanna's name mentioned ever in the fields. That never happened.
The reason
even
why
one time.
I was washing your clothes, making your food,
you were in there
making your
being a
bed,
little
cleaning your toilets with 6 brothers.
You were being a little princess with Mom, can I help you make the dishes? Can I tear the lettuce? And we're out there with clouds of mosquitoes. Susan's sitting there in the kitchen, sit out with Joe, and he's like getting apoplectic.
And what you guys forgot is we had a lawn, and we didn't have a motor lawnmower. It was a push mower with a blade that went.
I would have mowed that lawn 4
And
times a day
I
if I didn't
mowed
have
the
to do the stuff I
lawn.
had
We
to
had
do.
a huge garden. I shelled peas, and I helped Mom take care of all of you guys.
You weren't leaving the house, I know that. You staked the flag right there and said, this is where Leanna is living.
That's right.
When we were in Hamilton, Mom has always liked to work in the yard. Of all of the chores she had, she liked working in the yard. And one thing that she would do is mow our lawn in Hamilton with this little push lawn mower that Leanna was talking about. And when we were really little, she would have it doesn't pick up the grass like lawnmowers today, so there'd be grass all over the lawn. And Leanna and I would make these big round circles with the grass that we called our nest, and we would find these big rocks and put them in the nest to be our eggs, and then we would pretend like we were birds and fly from nest to nest.
I remember that too. I came in for lunch after a hard day's work and you guys were flying around in the nest. That was called playtime, which Joe and Sam never had, you know.
No, this was when we were really little, like, I don't know.
No, the playtime we did have was when Craig would get these ideas that if we went to the haystack with a sheet, and if we jumped off holding the 4 corners, that it would be like a parachute. But he was never brave enough to try it himself, so he always talked one of us into doing it.
I weighed more, and so we went with the lighter weight test
I think
pilot.
it was Leanna that was the first guinea
Yeah,
pig.
he tied the sheet to the 4 corners, the little loops in your trousers. He tied the sheets to that, and then he walked you to the edge of the precipice, and he suggested that you step off,
And when you
and
wouldn't,
then it would like float you down like a, and then you didn't do it, so he helped you off there.
And another favorite pastime is to take me by my ankles and swing me over the stairs, and he dropped me on my head.
That never happened.
Yes, it did.
Well, I got to tell one more thing about Joe. When we lived in Hamilton, that little cuss, he went in the bathroom and turned on the water and pulled the drawer out so that he couldn't get the door open to get in there, and water was running all over the place. We couldn't talk him into pushing the drawer back in.
It
he knew he
didn't
was in
just run
trouble.
all over the place. It soaked up the carpet in the front room and was running into the bedrooms. And before, I think somebody went out, was going to try to crawl through the window, and I talked him into pushing the door in. So it was hot water. He couldn't get it turned off because it was too hot, and he couldn't reach, without burning his arm on the hot water. So finally, I talked him into pushing the drawer in enough so when somebody was going to climb through the window, he pushed it in, and we finally got it turned off. And then who was it? Was it you, Hoots? Was it you, Heidi, that helped me mop for hours and hours and hours?
Oh, she wasn't born yet.
Well, no. So
There were regular
somebody, I
floods.
think it might have been Milton,
It was.
spilled a whole gallon of Basic H liquid soap on the kitchen
Concentrated.
floor. Concentrated. And Mom was mopping it up when we left for school, and when we came back from school, Mom was still mopping it up. And my mom is not a cusser, but I have to say, when I walked in the door, Mom takes the rag and goes, "Damn it.
No, what were you going to say about me?
Oh, just when you guys were talking about the ranches, I don't remember much from the ranches, but when we went back to the Montague Ranch, that one, I think it was our summer home, had that wood railing that was a scraped wood.
Yes.
And as soon as I saw that, as vivid as day, as if it happened the day I saw it, I remember it was probably Joe or Craig or somebody hanging me upside down from that wood railing and looking at it from the backside with my head hanging down and just screaming for my life that somebody's going to come save me.
It was not me.
And I
was on my mission.
on his
So you got
mission.
to start pointing to
I
somebody
never
else.
remembered
Oh,
that
God.
memory
No,
until
it
I
wasn't
saw the
me.
railing, and it was like I remembered every second of it as if it just happened.
Well, because at that time, Craig, Susan, and I were gone. We were away from home.
I think that's
Must
my
have been
very
so.
earliest memory that I remember.
We came home just to swing Milton.
Hanging upside down from that. That's my first memory.
Infamous.
Do you guys remember when Clarence was the Buddha baby, and when we built your first home? Our entertainment at night, because we didn't have TV.
No, hold on.
No. You were the fattest baby ever. So hang on, I'm telling the story about the Buddha baby. And so we all gathered around, and we'd put you in the middle of the bed, and you sit there like a little fat Buddha and do stuff, and we'd laugh and laugh, and you would act up. Was that was him?
Becky.
No,
She
that wasn't Becky. That
entertained
was
us.
him.
Well, surely
was
you
both.
remember how Becky used to
Becky
entertain
did that
us.
too.
Oh, in the middle,
No,
she'd make
we did it with
faces
both.
and-
He was the fat Buddha baby. She was actually cute.
She was the dance
Yeah,
around the Buddha baby girl.
He was just the Buddha baby, you know.
You guys' entertainment.
It
People
would
think that
take-
cage fighting is like a recent sport the last 10, 20 years. It was invented 42 years ago when I was like 2 and Becky was 3 or 4. We'd have family prayer every night, and you put me and Becky in the middle of the bed while all you guys yelled around it, and she would beat the crap out of me. It was
It
cage
was
fighting.
wrestling.
And
What happened was wrestle.
I remember she'd throw me down so hard I could see stars. I think I had concussions and I got CPS or something. I don't know.
I do. That is a fond memory,
Well,
though,
I-
of
I-
always putting the baby in.
I totally
whoever
remember
was the
that.
baby in the family getting put in the middle of the bed and us just
It'd
playing
take
and
us
watching.
a half an hour to get to
family
Yeah.
prayer.
get around to saying
Well,
prayer.
That is
cage
fun
fighting got
memory.
escalated as they got older, because I remember real weapons between Joe and Sam, like hammers flying through the air and burying the prongs into the side of the wall right next to their head. And I think there were a couple shots with a 22 that just barely missed off the
No,
side.
they didn't miss. They hit. They wasn't a 22, it was BB guns. We were live target practice.
Well, I thought Clarence was the only one that shot out all the windows with the BB gun.
He was aiming for the metal strip,
Yeah.
and when he missed, he'd go to the next window.
I had to hit that white strip in the middle, and if I missed, then I knew I was going to hit the next one.
There had to be a
So I'd go to the
consequence
next
for a
one.
bad shot, right? So
But,
And the only reason he got the BB gun is because these guys, these older boys, promised me that they would teach him how to be careful with a gun. And that's the first thing he did.
That window.
Thanks for messing it up. I never saw a gun until I was like 6
you can't say that, because you had everything you ever wanted. The younger kids made out like bandits. I was the oldest, and it was like, could I have a motorcycle? Absolutely not. End of story. Never. Later on, they buy motorcycles for everybody because they're running around on the
Yeah,
field.
Joe
and stuff
had
like
this
that.
I never
little
had a
time.
motorcycle growing up.
I,
I hear all the stories about you guys riding them.
yeah, but you were so far down the road. There's like a 2-generation gap between all of us and you. So you didn't have to have a motorcycle because you never worked. You rode around on Grandpa's pickup and picked his ears and pulled on him and acted cute so that you could just
Grandma,
hang
he would
out.
pull on Grandma's ears.
Yeah, in church he would pull on my
Speaking
ears.
of motorcycles, I do remember having a motorcycle in Dillon, Montana, and James would drive me around on it. And this one time we'd go, he decided there was this big mud puddle in the middle of the road. I mean, it went from one edge to the other. You couldn't go around it. He decided if we went really, really fast, we'd make it there. And obviously we didn't. We crashed in the middle of this big muddy muck. I'm hoping it was just dirt and mud and not manure too. I can't remember that. And I remember us sneaking home, trying to get downstairs so we could get showered and cleaned up before Mom
Knew that you had wrecked on the motorcycle.
And I
If you
got
came home too dirty, Mom would march you right outside, tell you to strip
Oh,
down
and
your
we
skivvies, and she'd spray you down with a hose.
It didn't matter if it was November or the first frost had hit like a month ago.
bigger fetch than ever. But little James, these big guys picked on him. They had to milk a cow every night, and somehow James always ended up milking the cow, and it'd be dark by the time he'd get it milked. And he'd be just so afraid of something out in the dark, and he come running with those 2 pails of bucket to the house with it. But anyway,
Is there any milk left by the time you got there?
I don't think he cared whether there was.
Well,
or
because he
not.
was worried about Craig hiding behind something to
Scare
scare him.
probably.
And I remember all of my brothers loved to tease me. And one time when we were living in the ranch in the summer home up above in Montague, James was doing something that was just irritating the snot at me. And I picked up a spatula and I threw it at him. And he ducked, and it hit Mom in the temple, and she went out like a light. And both James and I were like, coming over, Mom!
We killed Mom.
And we thought we'd killed her. And she woke up, but
Milton, we couldn't teach him to go down the stairs, backwards and crawl down like a normal guy. He decided to take this broom, and he thought he'd throw the broom down and the broom would pull him down, but he forgot to let go or something, and he went down the stairs with the broom. And
who was this, Milton?
Milton.
yeah, that was Milton when he was the baby, and anyway, so I got
remember that because I used to like to throw things down there.
Yeah.
I'd watch him tumble down the stairs, and then
Yeah.
I decided to throw the broom, and I just
forgot to let go.
And it carried you
Took me
downstairs.
with it.
If it worked for a witch, why not work for
So,
you, right?
so we bought this little gate to put by it so that it was before that there was the bathroom on this side and the stairs went down this way. So I bought this little gate and put it before the stairs. And I remember I went to step over it one day to go out to the garage or somewhere, and somehow my foot caught in it and I went bang right down on my face, and I had the biggest black and blue spots on my face. But anyway,
Talking about how the older, seriously, Susan, you could back me up on this. You and me, maybe you, we couldn't do anything. The younger kids got to do everything they ever wanted to do. Sports in high school. Let me just tell you a story about that. I wanted to play sports so bad, I didn't even get to touch staying after school for practice until I was a junior in high school, and then I finally got to go out for basketball only because it was in the winter and there was no hay in or sprinkler pipes or anything else to have to do. These guys, they played football, they played wrestling, they did everything that they ever wanted to do. And Dad, I didn't even think he liked sports because he'd never let me do it. But when his younger boy started playing sports, he turned into the biggest fan ever. When James was wrestling, you'd watch him, you'd be out there, killing a kid, and Dad's just like this on the benches pushing. People are falling off the bleachers on the other side, and I mean, he just moved the whole row down. People would stand up and go down a row, not to fall off the end. And he was like the biggest fan ever. I never got that experience, ever. I don't think he came to a basketball game, I'm not sure.
Well, at least y'all learned how to make a perfect fence. When you look at
I
one
gotta go
pole,
back to wrestling first, though. My friends would come to my wrestling matches not to watch me wrestle, but to watch Dad. They said it was more entertaining to watch Dad than it was to wrestle because he literally would clear out the bench in front of him, to the side, and even sometimes to the back.
There'd be a circle
He was
of
like
Dad in the middle.
he was doing the wrestling moves with his son. That's why.
And he had no idea which move he was doing, but he was full motion.
He was trying to help out. It was like,
Yeah.
James, get it in there, whatever that is.
On a more spiritual note, talking about Milton, when Mom was expecting Milton, I came home from Rick's college to help, because Mom had to be in bed most of the pregnancy, right?
well, yeah. I didn't know I was expecting him, and we took this trip to Boise to see my folks, and on the way there we had this minor accident where we didn't hit, but this guy in front of us stopped, and I don't know who was driving, but they put the brakes on so hard that it slammed everybody, but we didn't hit the car. And when I got to my folks' place, I kept having these pains, and then I started to hemorrhage a little bit, and I didn't tell anybody. It wasn't very much, but it was a problem. And so when I went to my doctor, when I got home 10 days later, he checked me out and he says, well, you'll probably miscarry. And so my prayers were that I wouldn't. And so far, it finally stopped for 2 months. And then it started again. And I just bled for the rest of the 5 months or whatever it was. And so I had to go to bed. And I had planned on taking her to the state fair and get
No, you're talking about Joe.
I'm talking about Milton. I'm talking about Milton. It was Joe. Yeah, I'm talking about Joe.
I was talking about Milton. But you can finish telling Joe, and then I'll
about
tell
Joe.
about Milton.
It was about Joe when I was expecting Joe. And so anyway, somehow we hung on to him till I was well, I want to tell about you. So
Me?
about Becky. They put me to bed, and I had to be in bed rest, and his folks were living right in a little hut right next door to us, and so she would come and take care of the kids and fix their meals and everything. And Aunt Claire lived in town with her little family, and she knew that I wanted to put Becky in the state fair. Lanny in state fair.
Is this a story where you tell a little piece about every single child? Because it's kind of all coming together.
Yeah,
I just
it
got to
is,
hear it.
but it is all the same story. And she put him in the fair, and she won first prize, first place baby girl.
She was
And
really
that's why
pretty.
she
And she
became
hung
the
the blue
housekeeping
ribbon around
princess.
The
her.
indoor
Because she was
baby.
Yeah, and she let her walk
She was
into
too
me.
precious to go out and shovel manure.
She couldn't have those big mosquito bites all
No
over
dirt
her face.
under her fingernails for the rest of her
You
life.
know, that really lifted my spirits because I was really kind of down worrying about him. So anyway, we made it to almost 8 months, and Daddy had been given an assignment of giving a talk in sacrament meeting, and I says, well, I started having pains, and so I had him take me to the hospital. And he says, I maybe be better call and cancel my talk. And I says, no. I said, they keep telling me I'm not going to have this baby. You go ahead and take your talk and come right back. And so he did that. And then the nurses were just really sure that I wasn't going to have him. And they all left me sitting in this room all by myself. And he comes in the door from giving his talk. And I said, man, I'm sure glad you're here. Go get a nurse. I said, I'm having this baby. And so he runs, I don't know, where's a nurse? And he goes up the hall this way.
Well, the doctor
down
came
the hall.
along and kind of gave me a dirty look that I better do something, go find a nurse.
Oh,
And so I went to try and find a nurse. And
they come with a gurney, and I had him in the hall. I didn't even make it the maternity room. And he
This
wasn't.
was Milton?
No, this
This
is
was
Joe.
Joe.
This was Joe, and he never made that little cry like he's supposed to. And I heard this doctor make a big slap on his little butt, and all of a sudden he cried, and we got him here safe and sound. But he had to be in an incubator for a month, and he didn't gain weight because he wouldn't eat because he was too tired. He didn't want to be here yet, and so it'd take me 3 hours to get an ounce of milk down him. And I had to do that every 3 hours, 24 hours a day, until he finally started to gain weight and started to be like he was a full-term baby.
And he was the fourth in 4 years. So you had a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
And a newborn baby.
And a newborn baby during that time.
A preemie baby.
But the story that I was getting at was when Milton was born, and I had come home from college to help Mom with the 7 younger ones because you had to be in bed.
That's right.
With Milton. But what I remember, a fond memory I have is for, I don't know how, first 3 months, forever, he would get up in the middle of the night and cry. And this is kind of indicative of how Mom and Dad worked throughout our lives.
This was James. This was Milton. This was Milton.
And so many times I would wake up during the night and Dad would be giving Milton a blessing. And he would settle down and go back to sleep. But he would wake up just screaming.
The reason
I'll tell you one thing. the greatest earache medicine that there is a blessing. Our kids had tubes in their ears and had lots of earaches and crying. And whenever that would happen, and Mother was walking the floor with them and I was sound asleep, and she'd wake me up and give them a blessing, it was over with.
Yeah.
You know what? I actually have an experience. This was one of the most spiritual experiences that I remember from my youth. This was in Territon when you had that big ranch and the lodge up in the mountains. And I know Uncle Bill was there, and I think one of Mom's other brothers, maybe Uncle Mike, but I remember there were some relatives visiting, and Milton was the baby at the time. And he had been a little bit sick, but Mom had gotten him to sleep, and he woke up crying, and Dad and Uncle Bill and Mike or whoever else was there, they gave him a blessing, and as they gave him the blessing, he stopped crying. But that was not the fact that he stopped crying was not the thing that I remembered the most. I just remember that this most beautiful, peaceful feeling just like descended over the room. There was just this amazing feeling that accompanied that blessing that I have never forgotten.
Talking about babies, who was the baby that was pretty much an infant when I came home from
College.
from college, from my mission?
Milton.
It was Milton. Okay, this is a true story. I want this on the record for posterity. I go on a mission for 2 years to England. The whole time I'm there, there's 9 of us, okay? And when I come back, there's 10 of us. They never decided to tell me that she was pregnant and had a baby. And when I come off the plane, I'm in the airport, and we're hugging everybody, and they're passing this kid around, and I didn't even notice him for about 10, 15 minutes. Finally, I said, whose baby is this? Are you guys like tending somebody's kid or whatever? No, this is your new little brother. And he's sitting here like this. He's like a month old. What? And I go, you never thought to tell me when you're on my mission that you're having a baby? No, surprise. Seriously. And I was like really almost offended. I was like, why would you not? That's kind of a big ticket deal.
And not after you've had 9.
and so I'm the oldest, and you're way down the line, and they like, here's the new baby, and I'm like, I don't know if we ever bonded because.
Oh yeah, you did. That was when you were holding them upside down.
I was trying to bond with you, you know.
Do you guys remember Clarence and his dog CD?
Oh,
yes.
Oh my
he
goodness.
loved that dog.
I have to tell you about CD though. We went to Billings, Montana.
How did we get him?
Well, that's what I'm telling you. We went to Billings, Montana to go Christmas shopping. Why Billings, I don't know. Or not, Bozeman. Bozeman, Montana to go Christmas shopping. I think it's the one and only time we ever did Christmas shopping in Bozeman. And we see this cutest puppy in there. And us boys wanted to get it for Clarence for his Christmas present. And Dad's like, the only way we can get it home is if we can get it home without your mom knowing, because if she knows, she is not going to let us have this dog. And we're like, okay, we got it covered, Dad. And so somehow we get it in the back of the Suburban under all the other stuff without Mom seeing it or knowing it was there. And every time that puppy acted up, and it's like, what, an hour and a half from
Well, if you have
Bozeman, more than that.
if you
Make it
have
3
10
and a half
kids
hours.
to take
Couple
care
hours
of,
at least.
why would you want to have to take care of a puppy?
So a couple
too?
hours, and every time that little puppy started to act up, all of us boys were just like, we were acting
Howling.
like, howling, and Mom would look back at us like, what are you guys doing? And this went on for over 2 hours, and Mom never figured out that there was a puppy in the back of that Suburban.
I just remember.
And that was a big dog when he grew up.
Did he ride him on the back and hold
I
on to the
was going to
fur?
say, I was only about 3 years old when we finally
Yeah.
had to put him down, but the only thing I remember is being able to get on that dog's back, and he would take me around like a horse. I would ride him all over the yard.
Had a little kind of makeshift saddle of sorts that had a little thing to hold on to. And he'd put that on the dog, and he'd just ride it all over the
What kind of
ranch.
dog was it?
It's a shame that we had to put him down, but he kept getting
But he
into
was
our
big.
neighbor's
He was
sheep.
big at the shoulder and
And
everything.
kind of hairy.
But do you remember he was a gopher killer of nobody could touch him. You could take a sprinkler pipe that had been dropped off at the end, and the gophers had made their home. There could be 20 gophers in there, and me and Joe or me and Sam or somebody, we'd stack that thing up on our end, and Clarence would have the dog right there. He's sniffing, knowing the gophers in there, and we'd pull up the pipe, and all these gophers would just go, and they'd go like spokes of a wheel, and CD, grab one, shake it, break its neck, grab one, shake it, and he would, by the end, he's running 50 yards to catch that one, and another 50 this way. He'd get every one of them. I mean, it was crazy how good he was with that.
Yeah.
We used to play tag with him. Somebody'd hold him, and you'd run around the house, and once you disappeared around the far corner, they'd let him loose. And if you could make it all the way around the house without him tackling you, then you were like the hero. And you rarely made it.
I gotta tell you about this one picture we have of all these boys, and they're all different heights and different physiques, and they're all showing their muscle. And little old James, they all had their shirts off, and little old James, I mean, he was the only one that had ripples, abs on his stomach, and his muscle was huge like this, and all the rest were just skinny arms.
And I have to tell you something else about James.
Because he had to carry the pipe like
But when James was a baby,
they call that the clean and jerk in the Olympics. It takes a lot of strength, you know.
When James was a baby, he was the prettiest little baby.
Yeah,
I mean, he was so cute, and so Leanna and I would dress him up as a girl all the time because he was just so pretty. So we would put little dresses on him
and necklaces around his neck.
Yeah, and he let us.
He was willing to do anything. He was such a good
Yeah,
guy.
he carried your elk out.
And he probably talked him into doing it.
No, it wasn't that.
Well, we didn't have any haystack to jump off at that time, so we just moved on to something else that was fun. So
Craig would get an elk down, and then he would feign injury of some sort. And instead of just helping Craig take the elk out, James would take all 4 quarters, 4 trips. Craig would be like scabbing the best route. And he had some kind of lower back pain.
I still feel a little bad about that, by the way. He was amazing with his abilities.
Was it Clarence or was it James that couldn't see when he would bow hunt?
That was
James. Was that James?
Oh yeah. He couldn't close his shooting eye, so he would wear a piece of duct tape, and when he got in a shooting situation, he would put the duct tape over this eye so he could see out this eye.
I kid you not. I called this 6-point bull in from here to the post over there, and I mean, I worked on him for an hour. You know, pretending, scraping the trees, cow calling, bugling. You know, doing everything I could to draw him in because I had James posted out there about 30, 40 yards, and this thing, he's just like walking back and forth. He's so ticked off. His antlers are raking up and down, you know, the trees and everything like that. And I'm going, why does he not shoot? You know, and I'm way back, you know, trying to pretend like I'm, an elk going away so he'll come closer. And I'm like, why is he not shooting? And finally, I got to see what's going on. So I get my binoculars and look down there, and there's this big old dead log laying, and James is laying prone like this, and he'd stick up his head with the eye patch up so he could see both eyes. And he'd go, there it is. And he'd put it, and he'd go down, and he'd put it down, like, he'd come up shooting, and he's like, you couldn't see where the thing is. So he'd put his bow down, he'd put the patch up, and he'd go up, well, there it is, okay. He'd put it patch down like this, get it up, and then he just kind of looked through one eye, and he couldn't see it. And I'm like, just working to keep the elk there, and he finally, you know, figures out there's something going, and he goes running off, and then James was shooting arrows at it. But I had it literally in his lap. And he couldn't see because he was shooting with. Later on, he figured it out. But for a couple of years there, he couldn't shoot with. I think both eyes open is how we finally figured out how to shoot. But anyways,
Tell him about the bear story.
Oh, that's too long of a story. I think that takes a while.
Okay.
One of the things I always appreciated about Dad is he would talk to you about anything and everything. Of course, he always liked you being in the tractor with him or whatever, because then he could read a book when you didn't want to talk to him anymore, and he'd let you drive while he read a book. But when we moved to Montana, we, you know, from our winter place to the upper part of the ranch, sometimes it took an hour and a half to get there. So there's always plenty of time to talk to Dad. But I remember on more than one occasion getting into deep discussions about how how can there not be a beginning or an end? And who was God's father, and who was the first father, and all that stuff. And anyways, Dad was always really patient, and I think in his own way, he helped my little immature mind understand that you won't know everything in this world, but at some point you'll know the answers to those questions.
So, Mom and Dad always taught us to work hard. But there's a story about Dad that has stuck with me my entire life. I was probably 11 years old, and we were building these calf pens because we'd been going to Jerome and buying dairy calves and bringing them home and raising them. And they were 4x8 calf pens, and each one of them had a feeder that was made out of 2x4s inside of it. And Dad and I made a couple together, and he showed me how to do it. And then he left me alone for the day while he went to work and said, I want you to keep working on these. And I had probably built, I don't know, maybe 10 of those feeders in some of the calf pens. And I'd worked pretty hard on it all day, and Dad came home and looked at it, and he said, "Clarence, we have to take all those apart." And I was like, "Well, why do we got to take them all apart?" And he says, "Because there's gaps on those feeders." And the gaps weren't very big. They were maybe 1/8 of an inch. I mean, no grain was going to fall out or anything like that. And I remember getting so mad and thinking, those damn cows don't care whether or not there's gaps in those feeders or not. And I was just fuming, and he could tell I was pretty upset. And he pulled me aside and he said, "Clarence, if there's something worth doing, it's worth doing right." And so not only did they teach us to work hard, but they taught us to take pride in our work, and that's something that has always stuck by me, Dad.
So I got a story feeding off of that. So Dad and Mom bought the ranch up at Star Ranch, and had a perimeter about 2.5 miles. So one summer we spent the whole summer up there building this fence around there. And Mom and Dad and myself were up there for a period of time, just the three of us working, and then other people would come up. Clarence came up with a buddy of his, Ryan, right?
Yep.
Anyways, so the first story, when we were there together, just myself and Mom and Dad, I remember every night Dad would try to talk Mom into going. We didn't have any running water. We were in this little travel trailer, probably like 12 feet long. Anyway, so the only way we could bathe was to go down to the cold creek and do your business right there in the water. And Dad would always talk Mom into going off in this little place and skinny dipping, but she was like completely mortified to do that. I think he finally would talk her, and they'd go off and get bathed, and I'd find another hole somewhere and get bathed. But I remember at night we'd come in, and I think that Dad's starting to get older at this point, but there's an outhouse that they built that was, 100 yards away from or 100 feet away from the travel trailer. So every night Dad has this bottle that in the middle of the night I'd hear him get up and take care of his business, and then he'd put this bottle back under the bed. And so I was very aware of this pee bottle that was in the travel trailer.
He'd empty it every morning.
Yeah, he'd empty it every morning. So another week we were up there working, and Mom and Dad weren't there. I think Dad was at work, whatever, he could be there. So it was me, Clarence, and his friend Ryan are all out there working. And we come in, and I think I went to the bathroom, and we're making dinner for the night, and I come in, and Clarence and Ryan got this nice this pee bottle, and it's filled with some cold lemonade that they just got teamed up to the top, and they're like, "Hey, you want some of this?" I'm like, I'm good with that lemonade. I think I'm going to pass this time.
So did you watch them drink it?
They'd already been drinking it.
I don't remember if I told him
it before he told us that we was a pee bottle.
I don't know if I told him after. I think I was afraid to tell him maybe after.
When you're a little kid, you take that to your grave, with big brothers.
I've got to tell you how much faith Milton had as a little boy. That's after we left the big ranch. We sold it and moved down into Meridian, and we had this little 2.5 acre place, and he loved the baby lambs, and he loved the babies. And one day he went out with his dad to feed
baby goats,
and he went out to feed these calves or baby goats, whatever it was, and in the pen were some brand new baby kittens, and the calves or the goats, whatever it was, had just chomped this little calf, this baby cat, to death almost. And it was, you know, and Daddy says, we're going to have to put it to sleep. It's just too far gone. And Milton says, no, just wait a minute. Just let me have a few minutes. And he picks up that little kitty and he takes it back around the shed. And of course, Dad wants to see what he's going to do with it. And there he sees Milton down on his knees and saying this little prayer about this little kitty. And so Daddy didn't have the heart to kill it. And Milton brings it to the house and gets a little box and puts it in this little box. And so we keep it there. And I'm telling you, within a half an hour, we hear this little kitty start to cry and start to crawl out of this little box. And this just proves the faith of a little boy. The Heavenly Father made that kitty well when their dad thought there was just no hope. So,
Well, I remember something about Sam that was very spiritual. I don't know which one of the sheep herders, but he had to go to town because he needed to binge. Drunk, and so Sam took his place, and during the evening there was a lightning strike that started a little
So
fire.
he's way up in the mountains in a sheep
Yeah,
camp. Right?
yeah, in a sheep
Sam.
camp.
Sam.
And it started this fire, and Sam didn't know whether he should start gathering up the sheep and getting them out of there before this fire spread. But instead he knelt down and prayed to his Father in heaven about it, and a little thunder shower came along and put the fire out. Do you remember that, Sam?
Funny story about Milton. Two things. One, we were in Aunt Ruth's house, and he was out running around playing, and he comes in holding up his thumb like this, and there was this white drippy stuff coming down off of his thumb, and he's crying, and he says, "What is it?" A bird had turned it.
Landed right on his thumb.
Right on his thumb.
It just fell out of the sky.
He comes in. What is it? and then another time he comes. We were at the house on Amity, and he comes in and tells Dad. He says, "Dad, there's a turd out there, and it's blinking." There was a frog. A toad. He found a toad that he thought was like a cow.
There's a little pile of
Cow pie or something, and then its eyes glow.
Was it Milton that couldn't say his J's?
Or was that Milton?
Or was that
It
Clarence?
was always O's and I's, like Mulk or
Or was it Clarence and he couldn't say his James, and so we would say, "What do you want on your bread?" And he'd say, "I want some jam on it." And us older kids thought that was so funny, and so we would
egg him on to say it.
egg him on to say it. Yeah. He couldn't say his J's.
Well, we've talked a lot about some of the hard work that we all did, and growing up on the various ranches. I maintain that is one of the greatest gifts my parents ever gave me, was to the ability to work hard in a very honest way, and to do it in a way that you could be proud of the end result when you were done. But that wasn't the only gift that I'm grateful for. I had a very interesting experience when I was 17 years old, and we had the ranch in Montague, and when those sheep, those ewes start to have lambs, they're coming by the dozens and hundreds, really. And so it's a 24-hour-a-day process, and my shift, even though I was in high school, was from 12 at night until 5 a.m. And I had enough time to come back at 5 and get showered and go to school. I'd always go to sleep, as soon as I got home from school and sleep until midnight. One night I came home, and I tried to be quiet always when I would come in, to not wake everyone in the house up. And I came in and I saw some light underneath. Dad had a study just off the kitchen, and there was some light coming from underneath the study door. And I thought I kind of heard something. I wasn't quite sure, but I was curious, so I went over and I could hear a pretty soft voice. But as I got next to that door, it was Dad praying. And as it turns out, he had been given an assignment to speak in church on the atonement. And he had been up all night preparing for that talk. And as a 17-year-old son, I felt kind of bad a little bit, encroaching on that sacred event that was happening. In my socks, I'd taken my shoes off in the garage and had come in very quietly. I didn't suspect Dad knew I was there, but I could feel almost an envelope of the Spirit just coming over me. And I had never prayed that way. The way he was praying was a completely new experience to me. But I had no doubt that my dad knew who the Savior was, the importance of the Savior in his life, the love that my dad had for him. Was a really special opportunity to have that happen as a 17-year-old that was in the middle of trying to figure out who I was and what was important in life. And so the testimony of the gospel and the way you were raised with certainty about important principles of the gospel is also a very important gift that I'm very grateful for from my parents.
And there's another gift too that I think needs to be said. I don't think any of us ever doubted for 1 second that our parents loved us. We had unconditional love for our parents. Dad wasn't soft on us, but we knew without a doubt.
Mom wasn't either.
Well, I remember when I was sick.
She let you pick your stick to get your licking. That was a major concession. We're out there trying them.
She wasn't the spanker. Dad was the
Thank you guys. I did thank you guys.
About Mom, I remember, whenever I was sick, she would come and sit by my bed, and she would just rub my hair and just sit by me and talk to me, and it was so comforting to have her there. Did you guys have that experience too?
I remember in sacrament meeting, Mom and Dad were infamous for falling asleep because they worked so hard. If they sat down, they would just fall asleep. And Mom would always let me put my head on her lap, and she would just stroke my hair, and she would stop every now and then, and I'm like, come on, Mom, keep going it. And then I realized it was because she had fallen asleep, and now I wish I had just let her sleep and rest.
They're building us up, but I got to build our kids up. There isn't a child here that hasn't given their all for us. This girl here, Leanna, came home when I was threatened with the miscarriage. She quit her good-paying job and came home and helped me feed 50 bum lambs that we had in our garage every 3 hours, plus take over the responsibilities of feeding the family and doing all the things that I did to help me save that baby. And I've always appreciated that about her. And Heidi, if it wasn't for Heidi, she was Milton's second mom. I went through a sort of a hard time emotionally after I had him. And Heidi just stepped in, and she was his second mom, and she just took care of him, and I always know that she would be there for him. So, and when Daddy had his heart operation, Becky, Clarence, and Heidi were just there. I mean, those were hard years for me.
I think that one of the scariest experiences I had as a father was with Heidi when she was a little baby. She was allergic to milk,
Yeah.
and the doctor and Dylan had done everything he knew how to do, and finally she was so far gone that he says, I want you to get her to Bozeman in a hurry. And
He couldn't do anything. We
he
tried
says,
to-
and I'll call ahead of time so that they will be prepared when you get there. And they took that little baby,
little Heidi.
Heidi, and her blood vessels had collapsed. They had a hard time getting the needle in to give her
Intravenous.
the liquid and the intravenous injections that she needed, and we came so close to losing her.
Yeah, they finally got to the needle in and was pumping fluid, just a drop at a time because the veins had collapsed, and they gave her a little wet wash rag. They couldn't give her anything through her mouth. And they gave her a wet wash rag, and all night long she just kept throwing that little wash rag in her mouth and sucking on it, a little tiny bit of juice that she could get out of it. And they saved her, but it was a priesthood blessing that didn't let her die before we could get her some help.
Do you guys remember when we came up with Heidi's name?
Yeah,
Do you remember we were going to Aunt Dora Mae's house down Logan Canyon?
yeah.
And we were trying to think of a name, and we kept thinking. And finally we came up with Heidi. And everybody was just suddenly, oh, that's it, Heidi. And then we tried to put in different things. What was her middle name going to be? And when we hit on Heidi Ray, it was just like
That's
unanimous agreement. Heidi Ray.
Love you, Mom and Dad.
Yes, we do.
Can't think of better parents.
Yeah,
Can't think of better kids.
you've
How
always
you
been there
shared
for
yourself
us.
10 ways, but you did. And never felt like there was 10 of us.
Yeah. You loved each of us the most. We were sure of it.
And
We were each your
we're here at a
favorites.
family reunion where, I don't know, what is there, 70 people or something like that, and Mom spends most of her year writing birthday cards and Christmas cards and everything. I think she needs to let that sunset retire, so that because it's growing exponentially now with great grandchildren. There's just no way you can keep that up. But it's like every one of my kids knows that when the birthday shows up, they're going to get a card, and it used to be a piece of gum and a card, and then when you turn 16, the gum went to the wayside, right? I think you get the dollar bill going along for a while, but anyways.
Well, but not with the grandkids. It kept on with you kids till
Okay.
you started earning your own money. But yeah,
Very lucky to have you, Mom and Dad.
It's a privilege to be in this
and it's
family.
been a privilege. I would have all 10 of you again.
And something that's kind of amazing, I think, about us is we've been through a lot of different stuff together, but the love just stays. Do you know what I'm saying? Whatever happens, we just keep on loving each other.